Have you ever wondered what is a trans person? Have you ever wondered why is a trans person? Maybe you have even wondered how is a trans person. And we're going to cover all of that and more in today's episode of Nomen Dubium. Hi, friends. Consider that the silliest opening I've ever done. I am so happy that you all are here. Hello. My name is Dog Meat Frog Legs. This is Nomen Dubium. And this is officially episode 1 of the pod. Episode 0, which I hope you listened to. If you didn't, it is hurting my feelings. Episode 0 was my trial run just to make sure this actually worked, because even though I am a white man, I'm a trans white man, so I didn't get the podcast gene. I have to take that with my HRT. So this is something I'm learning to do. We may have some bumps in the road, y'all, but you know what? That's okay, because we'll just hope your shocks are good and drive over it anyways. But hello, I'm so glad that you guys are here. If you don't know me, my name is Dog Meat Frog Legs. Not really. I still don't know if I'll ever give you my name, because I am a PhD student in biological anthropology. And being a PhD student means things. So I might stay anonymous, but it's cool. It makes me feel like Batman or Radio Rebel. I'm a PhD student in biological anthropology. I have 2 other degrees in history and anthropology. I have a master's in history, and I talk a lot. And I am a specialist in Neanderthals and their geographical variation. But I'm also just oh my god, hello. We also have a special guest. His name is Luigi. If you guys know me from TikTok, you know him. This is my son. He, just like his father, doesn't shut the fuck up. And he does have the 10 p.m. zoomies. So if he does start acting up in the background, I'm so sorry. This is his apartment. I just pay the rent. And so there's not much I can do to shut him up. But that's okay, because he's cute. Yeah. You want up here? All right. So, friends, as my, cheesy intro kind of cued you in on, today we are going to be talking about not only just trans people, but also sex and gender and biological differences and blah, 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 and whatnot. This is a topic that I had requested on my TikTok, but also in the comments of the last video. So I think it's an important one to really spend some time on. This is also going to be a tie-in to a video that I made on my TikTok that you may have seen if you know me from there, about biological essentialism. We'll discuss all that and more, but fucking boy howdy, and more. We have a long list of shit to cover though, so we will get started in just a second. I do want to just be a YouTuber for a second. If y'all like the pod and want to hear more of me, please subscribe. You can find me on TikTok at Dog Meat Frog Legs, but I will let you know that this is gonna be my primary form of content. Going forward, I may make a couple TikToks here and there. The problem is I don't really like TikTok. It's very bad for my mental health, as I've discussed over there fucking hundreds of times. And so you may see less of me, but you're going to get, well researched and thought out long episodes, rather than just my crazy batshit rants over on TikTok that are 10 minutes max. You know what I mean? So, drop a like, hit subscribe, ring that bell, fucking whatever YouTubers say, and let's get started. All right, folks, let's kick this off. This may be the boring part of the ep. I'm so sorry. So do some dishes or whatever, because we're going to start with some science. We're going to talk about some anatomy, some physiology. We're going to open up and we're going to talk about sexual dimorphism. Okay. So this is super simple stuff. Sexual dimorphism is the morphological differences between males and females in a species. This is dependent on chromosomal differences, hormonal differences, genitalia differences, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, sexual dimorphism, as you probably are aware, occurs across nature in many different ways, in a variety of extremes. So you have such extremes, for example, fucking birds, where female birds are birds and male birds are season 7 of Drag Race. And then you have it as simple as some critters that can't even really tell males and females apart of their own species. which can impact mating. Yeah, and this sexual dimorphism also isn't set in stone truly. Like with all critters, some experience it in different ways, some experience it at different severities. For some critters that are kind of weird, and if you ask me, aliens like snails. Snails, they're like sexual dimorphism because they can willingly just like change sexes. That shit is like perceivable only by snail. Okay, and so shit just gets weird. But in humans, there is some level of sexual dimorphism. Okay, and this is an argument that comes up all the fucking time with transphobes and with conservatives and biological essentialists of like, well, you guys think that there's no, so there is sexual dimorphism in humans, but if you look at sexual dimorphism in our ancestors, for example, or even our closest living relatives in the great apes, our sexual dimorphism as modern humans is super small. Teeny, teeny, tiny. And I will explain which traits we have that are dimorphic, and I'll get in there. Don't you worry, I'll get in there. But I need you all to know just right off the bat that while we do experience sexual dimorphism in humans, it's so small compared to our extinct and extant relatives. All right? Okay, just needed to get that out there. Now, a lot of the argument that people have is hormonal based. People are like, oh, hormones, right? And I will say, as a a trans man myself, I've been on that testosterone for about 2 years now. And so I'm not going to deny that hormonal changes exist. And I'm going to tell you why. This is the science part. We're going to run through the hormones. Let's start first with estrogen. Okay, Miss Girl, everyone's queen. Yeah. Estrogen it comes in two forms. There's like estrone and estriol. I think there's maybe 3. But estrogen is just, it's a hormone that can rise during pregnancy, can help the uterus grow. But it's just kind of like this ever-present yet fluctuating hormone in female bodies. You have progesterone, which is usually associated with pregnancy, but also with ovulation. Okay. It's a steroid and a hormone. It prepares the tissue lining of the uterus for the fertilized egg. It also stimulates breast tissue for like milk production. So it's an important one, right? It's a little bit of an activator hormone, like we call it. But the true, quote unquote activator hormone, and I'll tell you why, is testosterone. Now, testosterone is present in males and females. Super fucking important. And some biological males just have a really, really low amount in their body. Their testes aren't making as much as they theoretically, according to normal standards, should. And there are some biological females that make way more testosterone than your average bear. So testosterone is a tricky one, because there's a lot of myths around it. There's a lot of misunderstanding around it. You've probably heard like all the boys, their T's low because they eat soy milk, and now they, are all pussies and won't join the war. You've probably heard that. You've probably heard, this is where a lot of like trans athlete debates come up, because 5th place is just, that's, what's best for conservative women. So testosterone's a tricky one, right? It is associated with bone mass, sex drive, fat distribution, and then also like muscle growth and kind of your ability to like put on muscle really, really quickly. I'm yoked as fuck. Thank you, testosterone, for that. But most importantly, because it is kind of an activator hormone, it's got a lot to do with your red blood cell production, which is why like a lot of trans men need to donate blood, because we just make so much blood. And as an embryo, when you're like a little fucking goo ball, it's hypothesized that testosterone, when introduced to the embryo, is kind of the activator to like kick in. Like once that Y chromosome is like, I'm here, boys, testosterone production begins and things activate, which is where we get like a lot of our sexual dimorphism. Okay. Now, again, what we need to be so careful with is that in humans, we are not as sexually dimorphic as people want us to be. Okay. We're really not. especially when you look at like the Australopithecines or even Neanderthals. Like they were much more sexually dimorphic. Gorillas are super sexually dimorphic. Orangutans are very sexually dimorphic. Bonobos, not so much. We'll talk about why. But there is sexual dimorphism in primates, and there is in humans. It's just not like ours is pussy shit. Okay, for a number of reasons. But we'll, we gotta work in all that. So what about the skeleton? Okay, this is a big one, and this is truly like where I come in as a biological anthropologist and as a paleoanthropologist is I study bones. Okay, welcome to Bone City, USA. Mayor me. So there are a couple ways that you can estimate, that is the key word here, that you can estimate sex on a skeleton. Now, here's what I need you all to know, okay? None of these are 100% accurate. Nothing that you can do in science and in life is ever going to be 100%. But especially these are estimation techniques, and you have to do multiple of them at the same time, and then you can roughly kind of tally it up and then estimate sex. But like if you, for example, if you have a skeleton, let's say maybe it's only like 1/3% preserved, there's some of this that you may not be able to do and ascertain. And so it would be really, really inappropriate of you to then go, well, I estimate this with a confidence interval of 98% that this is a female skeleton. Okay, well, girl, you don't have enough to do that. So let's keep it to 95. All right. Now, some of these traits, we'll kind of start from the top down. So the skull, okay, is a pretty good one. There's a couple things to look at. Again, all of this is estimation. And you'll see. So when it comes to the skull, usually, if you are thinking of like the most stereotypical male, let's think of like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, okay? Or like Jason Momoa or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like think of like, whoa, okay, big man on campus. Or me. You can think of me too. Okay. Their skulls are usually going to be a little bit larger. Okay. The size and shape of the head maybe a little bit more, so like their actual foreheads may be a little bit more vaulted, kind of that square appearance, right, that a lot of people associate with like masculinity. The jaw, as we know, like a nice sharp mogged out jawline. This is due to a longer ramus. Ramus is the long part of your jaw that connects to the rest of your fucking head, okay? And also what's called gonial flaring. So that little corner of your jawbone, like the actual angle, sometimes that bone can have some flaring to it. We call that gonial flaring. There's ramus buttressing. So if there's like extra bone sometimes around the ramus, makes it a little bit bigger, more robust, right? A common trick that again is not like 100% accurate is if you have a skull with a mandible on it and you put it down on the table, because typical male jawlines are very square. The skull may, if it's like a super, big man, might sit straight up, whereas like a female skull has a softer, more obtuse angle and may like lean back a little bit. Again, not completely accurate. It's just like one of those things you can do sometimes. There's also the supraoccipital torus or the supraorbital torus. This is like having a big old brow ridge. Some big beefy men still have this. And then also the mastoid process. So if you take your hand and you feel behind your ear, there's a piece of bone there that sticks out. It's called your mastoid process. Usually males will have like a thicker one. It's just for muscle attachment for the neck. And then finally the external occipital protuberance, which is the literal translation is the bump on the back of your head. Dead ass. So if you again take your hand and you feel the back of your head, you'll feel a little bump there right before your neck. That's your external occipital protuberance. Males, again, typically will have like a more robust one. But again, not always. So that's the skull. Okay. Uh, Female skulls tend to be a little bit rounder. They tend to have softer, more obtuse angles in the jaw. May not have all these kind of like extra bony protrusions. A more gracile mastoid process. You get the picture. Right. But again, keep in mind, this is typical. And like, this is if you literally took like, God, you know those memes? Fuck, you know those like memes where it's like the big chat. Oh God, not to use internet talk. I'm not like that, but like you know what I mean? It's if you took like the most Mary Sue and the most Arnold Schwarzenegger person possible, and you put them next to each other. These are the traits you would be looking for. But again, not always true. There has been many a time in my own life when I was unable to accurately estimate sex. Okay, I'll tell you an example in a second. Like this just happens. Um, the lower limb and the upper limb, usually all you're going to be looking for is robusticity. So is the bone larger, just in general, right? And then sometimes length, not always. That's a secondary trait. And then the pelvis is usually where people are like, okay, that's where it's all about, right? Which I will say that makes sense because females can give birth. I don't know if you guys ever knew that, but they can sometimes, which is cool. But if they don't want to, real. Now, female pelvises tend to be more bowl shaped. And they have like a little bit of an anterior tilt to them, so they kind of like lean forward, have a bowl shaped. They also have a greater sciatic notch. So the greater sciatic notch, I will put a photo up, is this little notch where your like sciatic nerve connects to. In typical male skeletons, when you put the os coxae next to each other, the sciatic notch is going to be more pinched and it may look like a little heart. It's like a fun trick. But in a typical female skeleton, the sciatic notch is going to be more round, more oval shaped. So when you put those os coxae together, it makes like a little egg shape. I don't know. It's kind of like a fun trick we learned in forensic anthropology in undergrad. But again, not 100%. Now this one's kind of fun. Approximately 25% ish of female skeletons have this thing called the preauricular sulcus. So the auricular surface is the part where your os coxae, so the individual half of your pelvis, fuses to your sacrum, right? Which is your butt bone, okay? And when you die, don't know if y'all knew this, when you die, your bones don't just like stay together like a Skyrim skeleton. So when you die, and your sacrum and your os coxae do not fuse anymore, that area that they connected is called the auricular surface. That wasn't funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. So sometimes in like 25% ish of females, there's like this little groove that appears underneath the auricular surface, and it's called the preauricular sulcus, and it's like a weird little Grand Canyon chasm-y thing. And it is a weird trait. We don't really know why it exists. We have no explanation for it. It seems to only exist in females, but like not all females again. So it's one of those traits that when you see it, you're kind of like, okay, I can confidently say this might be a female, but I can't say it's 100% going to be. I don't know, it's like one of those weird things, right? So there are skeletal differences. Now, when you are working with skeletal remains, which I don't know how much you do that legally. I do it often legally. But when you work with a skeleton and you are estimating sex, you need to look at all of this. You need to look at the skull, upper limb, lower limb, pelvis. You got to look at it all, brother, okay? Parts that maybe I didn't even mention. You have to look at all of it. And you literally have to score this. There's different methods of doing it. Shout out Tim White. Actually, fuck that guy. But shout out Tim White. But there's different methods of doing this, and there's different ways of estimating this. And when you tally them all together, you're like, okay, I can 95 to 98% confidently say that this individual is female, right? Or male. This is not perfect. And most of the time, you have to be super careful, and there may be some traits that you say indeterminate, and that's okay. The other important thing I need you all to know is this is something that we do only on adult skeletons, because until like, honestly, like 16 to 18 years old, human skeletons look the fucking same. okay? Subadult skeletons look the fucking same. Because, again, testosterone is an activator, but also puberty hits, brother. Puberty hits, that's when things start changing. And puberty hits differently at different times for different people. And so we do not estimate sex on subadults. And if you ever watch fucking Bones or any of these other shows, and they're like, oh, this is a male child. No, we don't do that. We do not do that, okay? It's different in forensic cases, but like in the paleoanthropology world, we don't do that. Okay. But anyways, as I was saying, when you look at a skeleton, you rate all these things, you go down the list, and then you can say, okay, I think that this is going to be, with my confidence interval, blah, blah, blah. Here's what that does not account for. Gender. Whoa, crazy. It's almost because, get this, sex and gender are different. So this leads into the next thing, and I hear this all the time, which is so funny because I'm this is what I do. I'm an anthropologist, but people say this, and you've heard it, and if you haven't, I'm so sorry. Fucking TW. When archaeologists, quote unquote, when archaeologists dig up your body, they're gonna know that you were a boy. They're gonna know that you were a girl. This sentence, this single fucking sentence, is the bane of my existence. Okay, and funny story, not that funny. This sentence is also the reason that my family, against my will, found out that I was trans, because of this sentence, okay? And I think every trans person has heard this, either said to us directly or inadvertently said in the ether, and we all just had to fucking listen to it. It is ridiculous. And let me tell you why. Count this like your official, like this is bullshit alarm going off. And if you do need to clip this and send it to a relative, go right ahead. Go right ahead. And you can put my expertise in the text, okay? But when people say, when archaeologists dig up your body, they're going to know what you were born as. This is dumb. Let me tell you why this is dumb. First of all, we're not grave robbers. At all. We don't just go around digging people up. And I love you, and I love all people. Well, not all. There's a few. But I love most people, okay? Ones that are currently not holding government office. And when you die, I'm so fucking sorry. You're not special enough to warrant us digging you up. Like, I don't know what people think we do all day, is that we just go around and pop lids of coffins and fucking hang out with skeletons. We don't do this. We do not do this. Most of the time when we're looking for skeletal remains, it's for a really distinct reason. But also most of the time when we find skeletal remains, it's a fucking accident. Like we're not out here looking. Okay. So first of all, you're probably not special enough for us to be looking at your body. We're not going to grave rob you unless you want us to. We can work that out. And here's the other thing. This is going under the assumption that sex estimation is 100% accurate. And what did I just spend the last, I don't fucking know, 8 minutes telling you? Is that it's not 100% accurate. And I've made my own mistakes in sex estimation. I've made my own mistakes in looking at a skull from an individual and looking at a pelvis and saying, well, that's a male pelvis and a female skull, according to what we deem as normal. So what do I say? I say that I'm not confident. That's what I say. So again, this whole thought experiment that conservatives think is such a gotcha is based upon them not understanding what we do. So when they say, okay, well, sex estimation isn't 100% accurate, dumbass, lovingly. And then here's the other thing. This deletes the existence of intersex people. So thanks, asshole. And, oh my God, the most important thing, archaeologists, by definition, unless you're in Britain, are anthropologists. They study human culture. They know what gender is. They know the differences between sex and gender, and they know how to identify, given grave goods and context and cultural things around the body. They can usually identify if somebody is a certain way. For example, there's there's a good Egyptian example, right, of a skeleton, or I'm sorry, a mummy that was buried with bandages to give the mummy appearance of having breasts, and was buried with female associated or woman associated things, and the skeleton inside was deemed male. Okay, well, guess what we can tell? We can tell that this was somebody who probably was born a male, and lived as a female or lived as a woman. That exists. I don't know if you guys knew that, but you're allowed to do that. So even when we talk about anatomy, it's not this like simple, clear cut from the skeleton, from the muscles, because this is the other thing that we need to get into. And this is the hard part, like when it comes to a lot of sexism, is people are like, well, men are inherently stronger than women. Duh. Where are you getting that? Because okay, testosterone as the hormone does help in muscle production and does help like build muscle. Great, awesome. But you know what else helps build muscle? Fucking just using your body. Literally using your body, eating well, right? Eating fiber and protein rich diets. All of that also makes you strong. Testosterone does not like inherently make you just like fuck it, blah, blah. Like listen, I'm yoked as fuck now from starting tea, but you know what I had to do to get yoked as fuck? I had to go to the gym. I had to go to the gym and work out, which I didn't do. Okay. So there's this persistent myth, and it's been a persistent myth forever, and we'll talk about history and we'll get into all that, but there's this always ever present persistent myth that like men are just stronger than women and blah blah blah. Now muscle, there is a slight dimorphism that is in like muscle in different parts of the body. That old joke of like, oh, when you work out at the gym, like after a girl and you're a boy and all the upper arm stuff is super weak, but the leg stuff is crazy. That's not like, it's a stereotype. It's not entirely far off from like super base level biology. But also, again, you can work. This is a really beautiful thing about having a body. Just work out. If you're a girl, if you're a woman, okay, and you want a big, beefy upper body, mamacita, no one is stopping you. If you were a gentleman, okay, a young man, and you want quads and an ass that'll kill, go work out. You know what I mean? Like nothing in your biology is going to say that you cannot. Okay? Just please keep that in mind. And this kind of leads into something I wanted to talk about a little bit. Have y'all heard about this? Have y'all girl push-ups? I'm not talking about like augmented push-ups or like push-ups with your knees. All of this is super valid, but like I'm talking about this. This keeps coming up on my shit, and maybe it's because I am a little bit of a gym rat. And I just keep seeing girl push-ups, and they always the videos usually start off with the young lady saying, "Hey, push-ups. These are push-ups for female anatomy, and they're better for you if you are a female." And they make doing push-ups easier. And the point about them, if you don't know how to do a push-up, let me fucking teach you. The point of doing, or like how you do a push-up, right, is you have to have your hands supinated in front of you, hands splayed out, and it's kind of about the lever action of your arm. Well, this is saying that if you have female anatomy, this is what the video say, if you have female anatomy, that you should actually rotate your hands a little bit, splay them out a 45-degree angle away from your body. It'll make the push-up easier. And I've been seeing this. And as a gym rat and as like a biological anthropologist, I've been fucking fascinated. Because when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know if that's real. And I wasn't saying that to be like, all these women are dumb. No, I like genuinely was like, I don't know if that's real or if this is just a TikTok thing. Because I don't know if you guys knew this, but sometimes the internet is not the best source of factual information. So I was skeptical. Okay, and I started watching these videos to see kind of what was going on. And I watched a couple of videos of ladies that were doing these push-ups, and they said, it doesn't make any difference. But I started doing some research, and I noticed some very key things. Okay, so first of all, the ladies that said, oh, this is making it easier for me to do a push-up, were, given their content, again, I don't know them, but like given their content, they were ladies that had not successfully completed push-ups before. And this is their first time being able to do it. The ladies that did these push-ups, these augmented, quote unquote girl push-ups, and said, I don't feel a difference, were women usually that had done push-ups, before they were experienced in the gym, which gave me an indication about this trend. So I looked into it. I looked into some things. I looked into a couple of academic journals, which will be posted in the description below if you want to look into them. I looked into some things about carrying angles. Also, this like experiment of like cranking, not your hog. And then also this older nerve study that I'll link all down below so you guys can access them if you wish. But essentially, the carrying angle is the angle of which your arms kind of can swing at, can rest at through your gait. So when you're walking, your arms are swinging with you to facilitate your bipedal locomotion. Awesome. And according to, I looked at three of them. I looked at three of them. According to the three peer-reviewed journal articles that I looked through, it seems as though females may actually have a greater carrying angle. And this may be a secondary sexually dimorphic trait. So what does that fucking mean? Like, nerd shit aside, this basically means as though for some people who, may be female, it actually may be helpful to rotate your arms out or rotate your hands a little bit out to the side because it's more comfortable given the range of motion that your upper limb anatomy actually allows. Okay. But what's most important to understand in this study, and one of the studies I'm linking talks about this specifically, is that this is also variable based upon age and, number one, physical activity. Like I said, when I was watching these videos and I was seeing, girls that were like, well, this doesn't feel different to me. These are women that are highly, highly experienced in the gym. So yeah, they've already worked these muscles out. They've already practiced push-ups. It's probably not going to feel different to them because the physical activity level isn't changing, right? And then when you do have ladies saying, "Holy shit, this does feel different." Well, these are ladies that probably have not been able to successfully do a push-up, and so this slight augmentation is going into their range of motion and helping them even though that physical activity hasn't been common for them. All this nerd shit aside, this is one of these cool things in which looking at anatomy and looking at like people's actual activity level can be helpful in ensuring that they activate some certain muscles, they get a better workout, like shit like that, right? This is a very cool thing to look at and to actually study in real time. Right? Because we have everything that we just yapped about playing together. We have slight skeletal differences in the actual upper limb. We have sex and gender playing in because this is usually a female stereotype is that girls, can't do push-ups, whatever, right? And then we have not only like the actual experimental shit playing into, but we have like ethnographic research. We have people on the internet saying this doesn't work for me. Super cool. But again, notice all of this is variable because you have women doing this trend saying this is not different for me because of their physical activity levels. There comes a certain point, and this is all adaptation. There comes a certain point where you can train your body to do some amazing things, and it really doesn't matter if you're male or female or anywhere in between because you put the effort in. And that's where physical activity is so important. And so that's why I wanted to talk about this like girl push-up thing because first of all, I do highly recommend, like, push-ups are a really great exercise for anybody looking to get fit, not to fucking gym rat you right now. Gross. I'm already a white man with a podcast and I'm talking about doing push-ups. Jesus Christ, the Marines are going to be at my door any second. That's crazy. But like, this is a great example of how, like, if this is something you have struggled with, use your anatomy to your advantage. Absolutely. But also understand that it's variable and it may not work for everybody because everybody's skeleton, everybody's muscles, they're all different. So that's like a cool little thing I wanted to talk about, and it's topical. So hopefully, well, fuck, I don't know. Hopefully by the time I get this episode out, people still give a shit. The internet moves too fast. Now, okay, so that's a little bit of anatomy. That's the science stuff. I wanted to move now and talk about some cultural things, and how all of this interplays in the lived experience of cultures past and present. Because I can sit here all day long and I can say sexual dimorphism doesn't matter that much in humans and our anatomy, and I can do that all day. But truthfully, people don't really care about that, because if they did care about the science and if they did care about the information, the factual information, we wouldn't be 2 steps away from a trans genocide in America. So hopefully, maybe, I don't know, I can try to appeal to some humanity. And again, if you need to send this to anybody, this is a great place to send them, because I'm going to talk about performing gender. Gender and what it... God, gender is such a weird word, right? Oh my gosh. Such a scary word. Y'all, it's not. It's really not. Where sex is, traits that are associated with hormonal and chromosomal differences, blah, blah, blah. Gender is how you live. It's what you are. It's not even what you are, truly. It's just how you live. There's a great quote I'll read you guys in a second, but I wanted to discuss different cultures that experience gender diversity. Now, mega disclaimer, okay? I am an American. I don't know if you could tell. So my understanding culturally of being transgender and being, outside the binary or whatever you want to fucking say is Western. And so with that, it comes with all of the Western baggage, the Western words, the Western definition. And my language, the American English language, also has a limit to what I can describe. I am going to discuss what other cultures experience as other gender options that people, throughout time and history have experienced. But I need you all to know that I am not calling them trans. I am not calling them non-binary. I'm gonna do my best, because I, as an outsider to these cultures, I cannot tell you if they are trans, if they are non-binary. If they choose to describe themselves that way within their own languages, that is up to them. But it is not my job to define them in that way, because that's just another form of colonialism, okay? So we have to be very careful when we're discussing these third gender options or these alternative gender expressions, that we're not using Western terms to define them, because that's just disingenuous as fuck. All right? Sorry, that got serious, but it needs to. It's a serious topic. It needs to be. So I'm gonna go through some just pretty common known gender expressions from across the world. Maybe I've heard of them, maybe I haven't, but I want you guys to keep your ears open, okay? If you're doing dishes, maybe take a break. If you're fucking, playing video games, maybe just walk around for a little bit and see if you can identify similarities in all of these, because there are some, okay? So let's first start off with the hijra. This is a Hindu gender expression. They have a very, very long history in India, both in southern and northern India, although that expression kind of changes depending on where you are. The Hijra are AMAB individuals, so they're assigned male at birth, and they usually take on feminine attributes, and they are deeply, deeply associated with the Hindu religion and spirituality. And they are sometimes brought in for celebrating babies, like births and stuff, and they have a very deep spiritual presence. And again, a long history when it comes to India and their presence. However, they were criminalized and outlawed because of colonial England. Thanks, you limey bastards. Okay. To this day, I do believe that they are considered a protected group within India, but I'm not gonna speak too much on that. Okay. Now, next, from Indonesia, we have 3. We have, and again, I'm so sorry for my pronunciation. We have the Kalabai, and the Bisu. The Kalalai, these are AFAB individuals. So these are assigned female at birth individuals that present in a more masculine way. The Kalabai are going to be assigned male at birth. And the Bisu are kind of like a third combination of masculine and feminine energies. And they are deeply, deeply associated with spiritualism and kind of the actual religion in Indonesia. Okay. Next, we have the Mushe from Mexico. These are typically assigned male at birth individuals, and they have a deep and long historical connection with the Zapotec indigenous culture. And again, crazy. There are some spiritual aspects there as well. Next, from Madagascar, from the Sakalava people, we have the Sekrata. These are AMAB individuals as well. These are individuals assigned male as birth, and they're usually identified at a very young age. So at a young age, the people in their community identify that maybe they aren't as masculine as others, and so they are raised in the feminine. And again, there is a supernatural and spiritual connection that they have to the religion of these people. Two-spirit, this is a very broad term coined in the 1990s for different indigenous groups. So every indigenous group that experiences this gender expression may have a different word for it, but I am using the very broad term of two-spirit. And this is male and female associated traits in one person. And again, there's spiritual kind of attributes here. Finally, from the Philippines, we have Bakla. These are AMAB individuals assigned male at birth, and this is one unique case in which they actually may, there may be an overlap in this gender expression with sexual orientation, because, I don't know if y'all know this, your sexual orientation and your gender identity are separate. I have to tell my mom that every 5 minutes. But this is one that kind of actually can interlap. And in, the longer history of the Philippines, these folks had a lot of leadership roles, both in terms of like governmental structure and, crazy, spiritualism and religion. But colonization kind of did a number on them. However, there still are many groups that identify as this way. And then my last two examples are from Samoa, and it's the Fa'afafine and the Fafatama. I'm so sorry. I hope I pronounced those properly. The Fa'afafine are assigned male at birth individuals. The Fafatama are assigned female at birth. And they, again, take on these gender roles. And again, they have a connection to art as well as spirituality. So I know I made it super fucking obvious, but in all of these, there is, and I won't say in all of them, it's as pronounced as others, but there is a common thread, which is a connection to some sort of spiritualism. Because, and this is just me as someone who's, I've taken anthropology of sex and gender before. This is just me speaking in that way. This may not be fully accurate to everyone's experience, but there is something about transcending your body that is deeply spiritual. And a lot of trans people experience this. Like, this is not just me making shit up. Like, a lot of trans people experience this. This is why a lot of trans people may find themselves in different sorts of, like, spiritualities. I hesitate to say a lot of trans people are religious because a lot of organized religions don't want us. But I'll speak from my own experience for a second, right? I was raised Catholic. I am no longer Catholic. I do identify as an atheist, just personally, right? However, there is something about, like, this is so goofy, but like there truly is something otherworldly about overcoming your body and like really reaching a different level of like understanding in yourself. And it's something I can only describe as being spiritual. Even though I am not a spiritual person, that experience in and of itself is as close as I can describe. And even in Catholicism, there are saints that have their own different relationships with gender, and there are stories and there are different ways of interpreting things that, like, dude, gender is just fucking, it's just, I mean, like, truly, it's what you make of it. It's what you make of it. Here's a wonderful quote that I'm going to read from y'all. This is from a book I'll link below. It's called Ancient Bodies, Ancient Lives, Sex, Gender, and Archaeology. And it's a really cool quote that I think that we all can, like, wrap our noggins around. Performances of gender are not innate, but are products of learning and practice. Learning to act in a specific way begins in childhood, and different aspects of performance cannot be separated from each other. I mean, yeah, checks out, right? Fucking, genuinely, to me, kind of fucking checks out. It's, oh, here's another good one before I move on with that thought. Quote, gender was a work in progress. It was something people did, not something people were. Representations were part of the material that people employed as they performed their own gender, as they shaped the gendered experiences of others. Truly, my friends, when you're starting out as a child, you are a primate. So you learn by imitation. Monkey see, monkey do. Yeah, right? You're a primate. You learn by copying the people around you. You learn by copying adults. And this is something that all primates do, and this is something that we do really, really well. Okay. And when you are a young child and the world around you, upon identifying your sex biologically, says, okay, well, we have a way of handling people like you. You're going to learn how to be one of us. And you get taken into this extra culture, right? Because within cultures you have smaller groups, okay? And one of these is gender, okay? And if you're a young kid and you're taken in, like I remember when I was a kid, I used to engage in a lot of traditionally male activities, right? Because I have 3 older brothers and because I was raised by my grandpa, right? And so as a kid, I was always in male spaces, learning, again, by imitation, what males do in my society, in my Western American, mountain culture. So I learned to chop wood. I learned to use tools. I learned to fix cars and blah, 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 right? I learned to crack open a brewski. Okay. I learned traditional male customs by imitation. And that, again, that's like a work in progress. But at the same time, as a child that was born female, when I was introduced into female women spaces, and I was expected to learn in the same way, again, I'm a trans person myself, so I can only speak to the discomfort I experienced. But as a kid, it was all in the hopes that I would learn from the people around me, because that's how you shape gender. You learn from people around you, okay? And I need to say that this is also why when, conservatives, my family does this a lot, but when conservatives say things like, well, why do you need to medically transition? Why can't you just act, right? Or in the other way, when people say oh, transgenderism is just a parody. We hear this a lot too. You're acting like a woman. You're acting like a man. You're parodizing them. We'll get to historical connotations with that one. But it's all of gender is a performance that you learn from the people around you. All of us. It's not just something that trans people do. It is all of us, okay? And that's just not a fair comparison to be oh, trans people are the ones that... No, everyone does it. Everybody does it. If you were growing up as a young girl, did you learn by yourself, how to do certain things? A very funny example from growing up as a teenage girl was my friends and I talking about padding our bras, which I thought was fucking horrifying now with some, retrospect. But I remember my friends and I talking about padding your bras and we were helping each other do that. I staunchly was not part of that activity. I was just watching with fear in my eyes. But that was not something that we learned on our own. That wasn't something we did on our own. We learned that from media. We learned that from our older sisters or older friends. You see what I mean? And that's a goofy, silly, stereotypical female example. But everything that you engage in when it comes to gender is learned. Because that's what culture is, y'all. Culture is literally just shared learned behavior. Okay? So that's a really important thing to get down, is that culture is a performance by and so is gender. Gender and culture are just performances. Okay? And they're ongoing. They're ongoing, and your relationship with your gender should change. Truly. I think it should change. And if you've never explored your gender before, do it. It's fun. Maybe not in this political climate. I mean, still do it. I'm just saying maybe it's not as fun anymore. LMAO. So let's talk a little bit more about history and historical gender roles, because this is really, I mean, where it all comes from, right? Like, why are we like this? Because I can tell you right now from studying Neanderthals, okay, there's a lot of like false information from the whole man the hunter thing. I can tell you right now that there's like not a lot that we can say in terms of activity differences from male to female Neanderthals, because the past, I don't know if y'all knew this, the past fucking sucked, and it sucked for everybody. Sucked being a man, sucked being a woman, sucked being fucking everybody. It just sucked. The past sucked. So when you get like ancient societies that are egalitarian, largely division of labor is most likely going to be based on actual physical ability and not your pussy and balls. I know, it's tough. So let's talk about some different cultural differences in the West, particularly, because I gave you some examples of like other cultures, and I'm also gonna, I don't know if I mentioned this, I'm gonna link y'all below a fun little map from NPR. I'm so sorry, PBS. A fun little map from PBS that was made by community members that you can click on and learn about different gender expressions from around the world. It's really cool, and I recommend looking at it before Christy Nome deports it. So let's talk a little bit about some different aspects of Western culture, okay? And what the like, how the fuck did we get here? Okay, because we've ran through a lot. We ran through biology. We're not as different as everyone wants us to be. Okay, mentally, there's like, there's some hormonal things that could change like how the brain functions. I can tell you right now, my ADHD got way fucking worse when I started testosterone. But on the surface and below, we're not as different as everyone wants us to be. So why the fuck in Western culture are we described as being so different? Now, a good example to kind of look at in Western culture is to go back to ancient Greece and look at the Hellenistic ideas of gender and sexuality, because it differs. Now, I say Hellenistic because if y'all didn't know, quick history lesson, Greece was not like a country for a very, very long time. Okay, and so when we say like, oh, ancient Greece, that's not exactly accurate, right? The Hellenistic period had different places. If you ever played Assassin's Creed Odyssey, just think of that. So Athenian women, okay, for example, Athens being one of the main states of the Hellenistic period, Athenian women were property, essentially. Well, as far as we know, and I'll get there, Athenian women were property, okay? Athenian women did not get their own name, so they were named, but once they were married, they had to give up that name, and they had to just be like so-and-so's wife, and that was their name, okay? The only people who got to keep their names, the only like Athenian women who got to keep their names were prostitutes, so good for them. Which is, quite unfortunate. This is also in the Hellenistic period. This is where, again, like prostitution, most ancient of practices. And so, like, even though we say like, oh, prostitutes were allowed to keep their name, I think the modern idea is to be like, oh, well, I guess prostitutes had a different role, right? They were spiritually exalted, for the most part. So it's kind of like a plus in all ways. But then compare that to Spartan women. Now, Sparta, the other major Hellenistic state. Sorry, I hope you guys can't hear that. My fucking AC is busted and it's so loud. So Spartan women were trained just as much as the men were. Okay, they were trained similarly to men, but where Spartan men went to fight wars, foreign battles to defend Sparta, Spartan women were charged with defending Sparta at home. So they were trained, they had to practice. They also were encouraged to engage in similar homosexual partnerships with each other, just to, keep the nation strong. That's what America really needs, dude. That's what we need to be doing. Fuck this fake, ultra straight, whole milk in a hot tub patriotism. We need, like, fuck your best buddy. We need the golden, what is it called? Oh my god, what is it called? The golden circle or whatever. We need that shit because the homies will defend each other if they're in each other. Fuck. Anyway, sorry. I'll put that on my ballot, next time I run. Um Anyway, Spartan women were similarly encouraged to engage in homosexual partnerships, also just to like keep them company. Um, but again, they were expected to defend Sparta just as much as the men in the society would. The difference is, right, between Athenian women and Spartan women here is agency and gender roles. Because an Athenian woman would never be expected to defend her homeland, right? And to the, again, this is where gender gets complicated. If you are an Athenian woman, you probably are going to be like, well, fuck yeah, I'm not picking up a sword to defend. That's not my job. And you may see that as a great boon, that you don't have to do that, right? I know some people, same way with like the draft, is there some women that are like, fucking thank God, right? That I don't have to do that. But in the opposite way, then you have Spartan women who are given the agency to have like training that is usually reserved for the males of their culture. But again, that's a sacrifice, right? Of having to go to war for Sparta. So you see what I mean? It's like gender is so fucking complicated, and what may be like really great for one society is not really great for another. Now, what I do need to say, a quick caveat to all of this, is the farther back in history you go, remember, people fucking lie. Don't know if you knew that. People lie. Okay? I started this episode off by telling you that my name is fucking dog meat frog leg. So people lie, all right? More often than you know. And particularly when it comes to ancient Greece, when it comes to like the Hellenistic empires, they lied a lot. Okay, and so while it may be a common adage to say that Athenian women were like highly controlled and sequestered and had no agency, the archaeology may argue that and say, actually, I don't know. The archaeology may suggest that Athenian women actually had a little bit more agency outside the home than written record wants us to believe. Because keep in mind, especially with ancient Greece, that the written record is propagandized. Like you wouldn't fucking believe. Also, the Greeks did this fun little thing. This is off topic, but just so you understand who we're working with, the ancient Greeks did this fun little thing where they assumed that their history that they were writing down was just going to be remembered forever. Also, they also assumed that like the context would be remembered forever. So, for example, if you're trying to research like how the Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi, did her ceremonies, you will come across some fucking guy saying, oh, well, she conducted business in the usual way, with no information on what the usual way is, because the Greeks were just like, well, our history is so fucking cool, and our way of life is so fucking awesome that you guys are never gonna forget the context behind this. And so there's like, dude, there's so much Greek history where they're just like, you know how we did this. Moving on. And it's like, actually, can you guys run that back? Anyway. So that's an example. Those are, two examples, right? But what about, let's get a little bit more closer to like where Western ideals really, really arose. And what about the medieval views on sex and gender? Well, this is worse. Now, in the Middle Ages, there were two sexes, okay? Males and defective males. Because even though female anatomy was very mystified and it still is like pretty scary to men because I don't know, they think it's gonna bite you or something. Even though it was still very mystified, there was still like an understanding that like female anatomy kinda looked like a PP, kinda, right? Like there were still, people could like see some similarities. Just one really brave like bisexual monk, I don't know, he's like, fuck, that's not too bad. That's not too different. And so the idea was that like, okay, well, a phallus, like an actual dick, is going to be the real version, and the gooter cooter is going to be the worse, shittier, not as formed version. Do you see what I mean? And so this comes back again, like all things in the Middle Ages. This comes biblically as well, where they're like, oh, well, duh, because Adam was made first in God's image, and Eve was pulled out of Adam by his rib, and so it's not gonna have everything. It's gonna be misshapen a little bit. So, which is fucked, by the way. Just like need to put that out there. Also, there was the idea that males and females were ruled by different humors. I can get into humoral theory, but we are Jesus fucking Christ. We are creeping up on an hour. So I'm not going to get into humoral theory. But what that means is that in the medieval view, men and women were so different that their bodies ran on different temperatures and like different dominant bodily fluids. Like they were so different, they could not be in any way similar. Okay. And because of this, gender roles were extremely strict. However, again, here's what we need to remember. When it comes to history, people lie. And when it comes to medieval history, only, 10-ish% of the population was literate. And that 10% of the population had money and were the priests, the monks, the scholars, and the noblemen, right? They were not recording what the common peasant was doing. So where we may say, right, like, well, in the Middle Ages, they did this and they did that. We actually don't truly and fully know what the common people was doing. This is actually what I did my master's thesis on, because the common populace just was illiterate. So we don't even know if, like, gender roles actually meant that much in medieval society. We assume, right, looking at the archaeological record. But what we also know looking at the archaeological record is that after agriculture, female workloads increase, while male workloads sometimes decrease or stay the same. So after agriculture, right, females are working just as much as males. The difference is the type of work usually, because we see a lot of like extensive wear on like lower limb and like hands with females and like whatever. Again, this is dependent on the society and the culture and the time. But like what I need y'all to get from this rambling is that males and females, men and women in their societies worked. Okay? So when we say things like in the Middle Ages, this and this, there's also a lot of context missing for the average person. Okay? And that is where we also make this roundabout little loop back into gender and sexuality, because while it's easy for people to say, well, there weren't trans people in the Middle Ages, which by the way isn't true. Like actually isn't true. We have a lot of evidence to suggest that absolutely, even in medieval Europe, there were trans people. But we also just don't know. Same thing. Here's another thing. People are like, well, there's no gay people in the Middle Ages. And even some scholars will say, well, there was no homosexuality in the Middle Ages because the penitentials from the fucking 5th century or whatever, 4th century, say don't be gay and don't, suck each other off. Okay, well, that doesn't mean that there weren't gay people. If you use your contextual skills, what that will tell you is that the penitentials, which were for monks, written by monks, for monks, were like, hey, if I catch you sucking each other off, because we're not supposed to do that in general, we're not supposed to suck anybody, okay? If I catch you doing that, you have to pray the rosary and fast and eat bread, and then you'll be fine. So it's not that it didn't happen, it's that it did happen. And for contextual reasons, in the case of monks, it was like, hey, you're supposed to not do worldly things, and sucking your buddy is kind of worldly. Right? Again, same thing with homosexual like marriages, right? Same-sex marriages. People say, my own family has said this to me and my degree in medieval studies, by the way. There's no gay marriage in the Middle Ages. Yeah, well, so guess what? The only state-sponsored legal marriages were for rich people. Everybody else did whatever they wanted. And we have plenty of evidence to suggest that the normal average person could fuck, suck, and chuck whoever they wanted. And little, populations with their own unique cultural customs could marry whoever they wanted. Didn't matter. Okay? So just because the historical record does not outright say fucking pride flags were everywhere and it's suck and fuck city does not mean it did not exist. Okay? And also our concepts of gender and sexuality are modern, and we're doing a lot of retrospective work in the West where other cultures have known this for a long time. But keep in mind, too, colonization just destroys this. Colonization both of indigenous cultures, but also Western in our own, believe it or not, in our own Western culture, this happens too. Where like in the early Middle Ages, before everything's really homogenized, especially after the fall of the Roman Empire, people are doing whatever they do. And a lot of this is like local pagan practices continuing, and maybe they say that St. Bridget's a saint and not one of the 200 Dannen, but like, you know what I mean? Local pagan practices are continuing even under different names with different figures. And with that comes local folk ideals of gender and sexuality and the roles therein. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? So how are we here? How are we here? Well, first and foremost, you can blame the Victorians. And I have a long thesis in my life of pretty much everything that sucks, it's the Victorians' fault. Sure, they invented germ theory, and yes, I'm an anthropologist, so I study evolution, which they also figured out, but fuck the Victorians. The Victorians ruined everything. Because the Victorians took, oh, well, we are God's people, which was already an idea from before, and they pumped it up 1,000 degrees. They made, racism state-sponsored. Like, obviously these things existed beforehand, but the Victorians did it in a way that's just ridiculous, okay? And particularly with the way that Victorian women were treated, and also anti-buggery laws. England had anti-buggery laws, which, by the way, fucking hilarious name. England outlawed homosexuality and thus outlawed it in all of their colonies. And if you look at a map of who England had colonized, and you keep in mind that those laws were enacted in those countries. I brought this up, I think, with the Hijras, right? Those fucking laws impacted local, fucking populaces across the world because of colonization. Okay? So this is like a really important thing we all need to get our heads around, is when people say, like, conservatives are like, well, they don't have trans people in the Middle East. They don't have trans people. Hey, do you want to know why? They probably did, but you want to know why they don't have it anymore? It's because of colonization and because of globalization and Western ideals and like all of this fucking nonsense, dude. And other reasons, obviously. I'm not just speaking broadly for that case, but like it is so much broader and so much more dependent on colonization and globalization than people think. And this is where we get the main trouble, where you take all of this. You have the erasure of culture, of gender expression, where a lot of this is gone from our own culture, right? And even speaking as an American, our own gay, trans, queer culture is constantly under attack and threat of being erased. We see this right now. It's literally happening as I speak. As I speak, dude. Okay? But also understand that our elders, right? A lot of them passed away. A lot of them were not helped. And a lot of them were silenced. So even in modern queer history, our culture and our history is being erased. You can imagine what thousands of years of history could do as well. Okay, and then you have the perpetuated myth and lie that human sexual dimorphism is so intrinsic, that men and women are just so different and they have to do different things and gender roles are biologically determined. Fuck you. Fuck you. Okay, I can do a pull-up better than Pete Hegseth ever could, and Pete Hegseth would call me a girl, so I don't know about that. I don't know what he wants to say about that, right? My fucking grandma could do a pull-up better than Pete Hegseth, okay? So you have these continued lies around biological essentialism and a misunderstanding from Western cultures around what even sex and gender is, because they do not understand that they do it every day. They engage in it every day. Okay. When Kristi Noem pulls out that 20-gallon bucket of concealer, okay, and she starts packing that on, that's gender affirming care, right? Like, she's engaging in gender, whether or not she fucking thinks she is. So we have a responsibility, especially right now, to talk about this, to educate, right? Like I took this episode, I think, a little bit more seriously. I think I told a little bit less jokes than I did my other one because like this is a serious topic. Because I am a trans person and because we are 2 steps away from a trans genocide. Sorry, I'm making it really, really deep now. Also, my cat is biting the fuck out of my arm. Dude, transphobia. Ow, Luigi. Are you transphobic? I think he's transphobic. Ow, motherfucker. Anyway, this is important because trans people are under attack in this country, like actively, okay? And attack all over the world. And this is also one of those situations where the leopards are going to eat what they're going to eat. It's not just trans people, okay? And it's not going to be just us. The gays, women, anyone who's slightly different, you are under attack next. So we need to work even as hard as we can and as little as we can at times to demystify sex and gender. Because it's not scary. Trans people aren't the reason why your gas prices are high. I'm not the reason that you can't get a job. I'm not the reason that your master's degree is useless. It's not my fault. My master's degree is also useless, but I knew that going in. It's not our fault, and it never has been. And so when I read headlines like, oh, trans people in Kansas now can't fucking use their IDs, and we're going to start detransitioning prisoners in the US, which, by the way, if you ask me, is human experimentation and going to kill people, but no one gives a shit what I think. But when I hear that on the regular, and when I hear from my family that, you know, like I'm in a cult and like fucking blah, 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 trans people are so scary and awful. Yeah, dude, I'm like, you know what? This information needs to be disseminated because what do you mean? What do you mean something as benign as sex and gender is going to like actually rip us apart? And it's because we're a scapegoat, and we always have been. Because if you don't understand things and you're living under this, you know, post-colonization, post-globalization lie that your concept on gender and sexuality is the truth, then yeah, sure. Trans people are super scary. But this is why these stories need to be protected. Okay. I'm gonna call it. This got out of hand. This got so long. I thank you guys so much for listening. I know that this episode actually like wasn't as fun as the other one because it's an important topic, and I also just need to say too, like I know I got on my trans high horse a second ago. I'm gonna get back on it real quick. Saddle up. Trans people are tired of explaining this to you. Like, we are so exhausted, dude. Like, we are so fucking tired because we live every day in fear. We're tired. So this was like a serious episode because it needed to be, because I'm only saying this once. But I think I threw in a couple, you know, dick and balls jokes, which is all I really needed to do, honestly, for my content. Okay, my cat's mad at me. He's calling me T-slurs. So I am going to call it here. Thank you guys so much for listening. Like I said, I'm going to post all of these sources in the description if you would like to look into them yourself. I do highly